All right, so welcome, guys. So my name's Anna Heckman, and I've been in the sanctuary class this past semester, and I've been working with Ulster Immigrant Defense Network, basically just shadowing Jerry, who's in transport and accommodations. And so we're going to talk a little bit about what the work they do today and the way that it relates to what we've been talking about in sanctuary. So I'll let them introduce themselves.
I'm Jerry Brodsky, and I'm a team coordinator, team leader for transportation and accompaniment, which I'll explain a bit later.
Thank you, Jerry. My name is Father Frank Alanya. I'm one of the priests at Holy Cross Santa Cruz Episcopal Church in Kingston. And I guess I'm one of the founding members of the Ulster Immigrant Defense Network. Do you want me to start? Okay. What is the mission? Before getting into the questions that we've been asked to respond to, I just want to give you a little background as to how this thing came to be. After the election, the clergy in Kingston, recognizing that the level of fear among within our immigrant community was rising very seriously, decided to band together and request that the Common Council and the mayor designate Kingston as a sanctuary city. After much public discussion and debate, and apparently the Common Council meeting at which the resolution passed was the largest attended Common Council meeting in the history of Kingston. So there was a lot of energy surrounding this on both sides. But happily, at the end of January, it passed, and Kingston identified itself as a sanctuary city. And basically that means that the local police will not act on behalf of the federal agents, the ICE agents, that if ICE wants to do its thing in Kingston, they have to do it without the assistance of the local police. After that resolution passed, it occurred to me that it might be important that the faith communities in Kingston in some way incarnate what we were asking the city to do. And immediately my first association was with the medieval experience of sanctuary, which has been activated in recent history in various locations. And then I thought, well, some of our faith communities should identify themselves or wrestle with the issue of identifying themselves as sanctuaries in the traditional sense. And so I called a meeting of clergy in Kingston at the beginning of March, I guess it was, to talk about this. And the night before, I went to a FASO no-show, what do they call those public, no, it wasn't a protest, town hall meeting that FASO was supposed to show up for, and he didn't. And so they asked me if I would say something, and so I said something. I indicated that my own church, Holy Cross Santa Cruz, had made a decision to be a sanctuary church, and that I had a meeting planned for the next day with the interfaith clergy of Kingston to see how much traction we could get for this among the various faith communities. And I told the folks that at that evening meeting, I said that we had installed a shower in the church bathroom to accommodate sanctuary needs, and we were constructing or setting aside space, as bedroom space, in various parts of the campus of the church. And I ended up my remarks, and I said to this group of, I guess there were 400 people inside and 400 people outside. It was a well-attended FASO no-show. You should have come. that I was having this meeting the next day and said, if you want to come, any of you want to come and listen to the clergy talk about this, please do. Well, on that Saturday afternoon, I had prepared 20 agendas for the 20 or so clergy that I expected, and I was 110 agendas short. That many people showed up. Again, I say that to give you a sense of how animated the wider community is by the issues that we're addressing or trying to address. I was moved, I want to tell you two stories. Right after the election, one of our Latino community members, in the context of a church leadership meeting, told a story about his nephew coming home from school that day, a grade school child, about 9 years old, coming home from school and telling his mother that he wasn't going to go to school tomorrow and that he was never going to go to school again. And when his mother inquired of him why, he told her the story that that day and that afternoon after school, a group of his peers had cornered him in the hallways of the school and told him that he was not a real American, that soon he would be sent back to where he came from, and that the problem would be solved. This kind of really, understandably, distressed this young boy. And it occurred to me at that time that something needed to be done to at least to provide greater safety for children in the schools. Also, that December, I found myself in the unenviable position of speaking to at the end of our Latino Mass, to the adults in church that day, and recommending to them that they needed to consider filling out authorization to have their children turned over to the people that they wanted their children turned over to should the day come when they would not return home from work. That was, whenever I tell that story, it still pains my heart. So these kinds of stories and this level of fear and distress among people who I knew and care about and loved, kind of was my own, provided my own animation for being about this work of sanctuary. So we had that meeting at the beginning of March, and all these people came from the community, and not just from Kingston. They came from Ellenville, they came from New Paltz, they came from all over the county. So my thought was, this came from Rhinebeck as well. What I had understood as a Kingston kind of based sanctuary movement in a traditional sense ended up beginning as something much wider than that. And in the context of that meeting, it became clear to me that sanctuary could be and should be much broader than the traditional offering of space within a house of worship where someone could be protected from deportation, the immediate threat of deportation. And it was obvious that sanctuary and the notion of radical hospitality could be manifest in a variety of ways. And the group began to give voice to this. And people talked about, we can help people to be safer by teaching them what their rights were and helping them to avoid the traps that ICE could easily set for them. What was a legitimate warrant and what was an illegitimate warrant that had no compelling power to it. We also talked about people being kept safe in their homes. In other words, if somebody is feeling unsafe out in the street, maybe we could cut down their need to travel out of their house, except and provide support for them for essential kinds of services. And so maybe we could provide, since most people at risk don't have licenses and can't drive, they immediately put themselves at risk when they get behind the wheel of their car. So if we could accompany people to doctor's appointments or transport their children to school if they were doing that on their own, or if we could accompany them to court appointments or those kinds of things. That would be another way of keeping them safe. Another way of keeping them safe is giving them access to legal consultation if they were perceive themselves to be under immediate threat, and to explore whatever legal options they might have. Other ways to keep them safe would be to, well, one of our mission expressions is to, we've created a team that goes into the schools, works with the school administration and the administrators at anti-bullying kinds of programs, and making sure that immigrants are included in that the kind of surveillance that schools exercise on behalf of children. So there are many ways to give expression to sanctuary, to create safe spaces, and to enable people to feel safer wherever they are, whether they're on the streets or at home, or if need be in a house of worship. The response of the interfaith community has been wonderful, and I will speak to that as we respond to some of the questions that you've put together. Do you have any questions about what I've said so far? Okay.
I just wanted to have a moment to say what led me to join this group in March when that first big meeting occurred. It seemed to me that rather than stewing about the results of the election, that what was needed was to move into action, to do something. And when I heard about this meeting, I went and was struck, actually, by this is it, this is the thing I need to do, and I want to work with this man and work with this group. And we've been working with about 14 other people on our coordinating council, team leaders of various teams within our organization. I'll expand a little bit on that. We have about 6 to 7 working groups. Several of them have been mentioned. Would you like me to add a couple more? I'll add a couple more. The school outreach committee that Father Frank just mentioned is also involved with creating a model for school systems in the area. They've met with 3 or 4 school districts already in the anti-bullying issue, but also informing the schools about how to handle their records, their documents about the children, about whether they're immigrants or not. The school does have some option as to what they include in the personnel, the private records of the children, and how that would interface with authorities as well. So there are several issues in this immigrant package that we're trying to inform the local school districts about, and we've been met very warmly on that issue. Perhaps I'll say something about my team. We combined 2 teams. Transportation, obviously, is a big part of what we do. The accompaniment part is an ancillary part of that. The accompaniment part is if someone is going to an immigration hearing of some sort, a court proceeding of some sort, and wanted moral support, we're there. So not only if they need transportation, but we are there to be with them, to be the backup, to cover their backs, so to speak. I wanted to say something about transportation. New York State, a few years back, allowed immigrants to have driver's license. The issue occurred after 9/11, when that right was withdrawn in New York State. Eliot Spitzer, governor at the time, tried to reinstate driving to immigrants, and that was met with a severe backlash. So that legislation has never occurred to allow immigrants to obtain driver's license. So for our immigrant community to have productive lives, they are extremely limited as to what they can do. So they have recourse to ride bicycles, drive illegally. Some of them get licenses from other states, or they take the risk of driving without insurance, without a license, and therefore getting in their car, they are at risk of being pulled over for minor traffic infractions, which may ultimately result in them being deported. There is a strong movement afoot by a group called Green Light New York City. You have handouts about that, in which there's a renewed push to get this legislation enacted in New York State. Not only is it the right thing to do, New York State would gain millions of dollars in revenue from these driver's license fees and other fees, and we would all be safer and have cheaper insurance if they were therefore allowed to get car insurance. So there are obvious reasons why this is a good thing. However, what's lacking throughout the state is massive support for this change. And so I'm putting that specific appeal out, that you contact your state assemblymen and other representatives to push this particular item. Obviously, that's one of my pet issues at the moment. And I can answer questions about that.
We've also set up a hotline that is answered by bilingual volunteer staff. It's 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, so that when calls come from someone who is feeling threatened or feeling a need for help relative to their immigration issues, somebody's always there to respond in a professional way and to make appropriate connections within the network and beyond the network to the kinds of help and support they may need.
So thank you so much for all of that. I just want to ask a couple of questions about sort of diving into this idea of sanctuary, specifically the sanctuary you guys have created. So, of course, you have a physical space, talking about the shower, and the various families in your community that have pledged to open their homes as well, if need be. But I'm wondering how you view things like the helpline and transportation and accompaniment as being sanctuary, because they are not, in fact, a physical space. And oftentimes, like Jerry is not a reverend, so it's not even a member or someone who's clergy that is giving that sanctuary, as you might have seen in the medieval ages. So in what ways do you see this as being a sanctuary?
I think the first sanctuary that we offer to people is the sanctuary of our hearts. And you don't have to be a clergy person to do that. You just have to be a human being. And one of the, I met with a group of households that are wrestling with and considering making their own homes safe houses for people should that need arise. And I was sitting at the table, and there were about maybe a dozen households represented, And I asked as a first question, why do you want to do this, or what motivates you to do this? And some folks who came from a Christian background said that, this is who we are. This is what it means for us. This is what it means to be a Christian, and we can't respond in any other way. We're compelled to do this, to care for the stranger among us. Some people from no particular faith tradition said that, this is what it means to be a human being. How could a human being not respond to somebody who finds themselves in this situation? And then there were some members of the table who were members of the Jewish community, and they said, this is our time, and this is a way for us to respond as the righteous did during the Holocaust. And it really occurred to me as I was sitting, and one of the things that sustains me as we do this work is being in a room with people such as the ones I've just described. I find myself in the presence of holiness and in the presence of God. When people respond in the way that these folks are so generous responding. And it's not just peculiar to the group around the table, but the people involved in the network and the people who are volunteering and the people who are rising to this challenge really make holiness quite palpable for me, and that nurtures me. Did I answer? Did you ask me a question? So what was the question?
How are these spaces sanctuary?
Oh, so sanctuary, there's the traditional sense, but we know that we can help people to feel safer in a variety of ways. So it's simply broadening the traditional sense of sanctuary to creating safe spaces, beginning with our hearts and in any other way we can, to create a better environment, or a more secure environment for people who are under siege and threat.
So I'm also curious, how and why does this fall into the hands of the church? There's obviously a great need, but is this an American issue? Is this a church issue, an interfaith issue? Like, how should we perceive this, and where does that responsibility come from?
I'd like to just jump in and say that I think it's obvious that it's a community issue, it's an individual issue, as well as a church issue. It feels universal to me.
Yeah, and I think that the overwhelming response that was there at the beginning and continues speaks to this being a universal issue. When any one of us is threatened, we are all threatened. And I think that's what many people are feeling right now. And from at least the major faith traditions, the ones that we're familiar with in this part of the world, as I speak to rabbis and speak to the imam, it's kind of, this is what we do as people of faith, and it really doesn't matter what faith tradition we're coming out of.
So I'd love to hear some stories about what is most fulfilling about this work, and sort of how you've been able to engage. I know that it started with a meeting, but you've really grown a lot in this past almost year or more. So tell us a little bit about just sort of what's been the most fulfilling moments for you guys.
I'd like to start. Just the other day, I was asked to give a ride to a man in Kingston who needed to go to court about a court date he had about a traffic incident. And getting to know him in the car to and from this court incident was quite wonderful. I learned about how hard it is for this man to live in this community. Every time we saw a police vehicle, he got frightened. he had shared with me that his transportation, his bicycle, had been stolen the night before from work. He works in a local restaurant, and the video captured the man clipping the lock on his bike and taking his transportation. And now he has no transportation. I had the opportunity to deal with this man on a very human way. So we went to the Salvation Army and we got him another bike. And I really got connected to him. He at first said he didn't speak much English, but he confessed that he's a history buff and he has no family here. He reads about history on his cell phone at night, and he was very learned about European history and other topics, and had a lot of very good English to express himself. So basically what I'm saying is just spending 2 hours with this man, kind of living in his shoes, made a tremendous impact on me. And I think the need to interact with our immigrant neighbors is imperative. And there's no other way really to get to see what they are up against living in these conditions today.
The question again? I'm sorry.
Just talk a little bit about some of the experiences you've had and what makes this work fulfilling for you.
Yeah, I think being able to be of assistance to people who are in the situation that the population that we're serving is rewarding in and of itself. And as I mentioned before, working with the volunteers who are responding as generously and enthusiastically and as deeply as they are responding is also very soul nurturing for me.
I'm wondering now if you might share some of the complications that you guys have faced. You're dealing with a very political issue with all volunteers, organizing this with people from different faith backgrounds, with different degrees of faith. So I'm curious the different ways that you've come across complications in your mission. If you want to take a second to think about it.
Would you like to start tactfully and then I might?
Well, whenever you get a group of people together, you have to deal with the issues that happen when people come together. People come together from different places with different agendas, with different knowledge bases and different convictions and different things that you might say the trigger points, and this happens with any group, and it certainly happens in our coming together and trying to band together for the mission that we've identified, and to do it in a way that relates most to the needs of the people we're serving as opposed to what may be our needs. And we've kind of covered some bumpy ground about that, and I think we're at a much better place to respond as a community to the community that we want to serve.
It just went out of my head. Oh, I got, okay. So we do have this menu of services and facilities, and I think one of the biggest challenges at this point is how to communicate what we have available to the immigrant population that could use our services. And to that end, we just created cards bilingual cards that we're hoping people will hand out that have our 24-hour helpline number on it. So the key thing is to get word out that, hey guys, we're here, we can help you. And then to get funds to establish that. And we recently had a concert by Ars Corellis in Ulster County to help fundraise. So those funds also will help us to fund. We do have a fund in which we can help people in need to obtain legal services or other expenses associated with urgent immigration needs. So the challenges are getting out there, getting funding, getting volunteers, while we're working and playing well together.
The other part of this is obviously establishing trust within the Latino community or the immigrant community, that when they call, calling a number, calling people you don't know, an organization that you don't know, and a new organization, you may, if you're already feeling at risk, this may be an experience of deepening your experience of risk. So there's a need for us to socialize what we're wanting to offer and what we're able to offer with the community that we want to serve in a way that that enables them to be trusting of us. And we're not all Anglos working in the network. We have some very high-profile members of the Latino community who will be the give us entree, give the whole network entree to the population that we want to serve.
So I'll just do one last question before we open it up to everyone else. But I'm curious what kind of a message you think this work is sending out into the world. It's very clear that you have sort of a 21st century sanctuary that you guys are building. And I'm just curious, what message would you like the world to know about your work? And then also, what message about the church does this send to the world and how it's changing?
I think the message is, that we are being faced with something that is very evil. The kinds of things that are being perpetrated by this current administration in terms of scapegoating groups of people and the generating a climate of fear among people. That is palpably evil in my estimate, and the message is that human beings and people of faith and people of no faith, we're all, if someone is the victim of evil action, we're all impacted by that, and there's a need for us to rise up and resist that evil. Always, obviously, not with evil. And we don't respond to hate with hate. We don't respond to hate with violence. But if we don't respond, then we are complicit in what is going on. So the most important message is that this is something that affects all of us. And I can't say that everybody has to respond in a given way. And how an individual responds is their choice. That they respond, I think, is a moral urgency. How they respond is obviously something that they have to discern within their own resources and ability and sense of how they live in this world.
Well, thank you guys so much for coming today and speaking with us. Father Frank and Jerry, you guys are doing phenomenal work, and the community is very thankful for you. Can we turn it over to some questions from the audience?
Sure. So, Jerry, you spoke about encountering you spoke about the resistance from the government towards granting immigrants driver's licenses. I was wondering what the response has been from the local government towards your organization. you said that when Kingston declared itself a sanctuary city, there was energy on both sides. So I wonder what the response from that other side has been like, if you've interacted with them at all.
I guess I'll speak. What's different is the way the city of Kingston and its mayor and its policing force are responding is in support of immigrants and keeping their priorities straight in terms of what they're about and what they are to be about. In the same environment, we have the Ulster County law enforcement operation, the sheriff in Ulster County, who, in my experience of him, is on the other side of that. He does things that are unnecessary. If anybody that is brought into the jail for any reason, he asks the question, were you born in this country? That's not necessary, but he takes it upon himself to do that, and if somebody responds, I wasn't born here, then he immediately refers that person's name to federal authorities. So he's clearly on the other side of this fence. So we're dealing with both of those in Ulster County. A white supremacist organization in the person of the sheriff and his company, and the kingdom that he has surveillance over, and we're dealing with a more reasonable and civil response on the part of at least the Kingston police, and I know the Saugerties police, and I believe the New Paltz police as well.
Any other questions?
As I indicated, there are pending laws in Albany at the moment. There are various organizations such as Greenlight New York City. Woodstock Jewish Congregation also has a task force addressing the issue of reinstating driver's license. So on the basic level, people can call their local representatives, find groups to work with, hook up with Greenlight New York City. Importantly, talk to your neighbors about it. The backlash against this issue in the past is what had the executive order by Elliot Spitzer pulled because there was an uproar throughout the state. So public opinion about this, people need to be educated about this. I mean, why are immigrants driving without driver's license? It's not that they want to break the law, they have no choice. They can't get a driver's license. I didn't know that until very recently. So did you guys know that? So tell people about that. And your driver's insurance, your insurance rates will go down too. And the state coffers will be fuller because they'll get all these fees. We need to educate each other about this issue.
I'm glad Cherry spoke to that. There's a lot of misinformation that people hold on to and is reinforced by the administration in different ways. And, I think it's really important that people have accurate information. Like one of the things you hear is, well, why don't these undocumented people, wherever they are, why don't they just apply for entrance into the country, to emigrate legally, et cetera, et cetera? Well, they can't. There is no way to come to the United States unless you have money, or that you are a professional person, or marry somebody. So when somebody says, well, why don't they do it the way my grandparents did it? Well, that option is no longer available, and people don't know that. The other thing I wanted to talk about is that we have this defense network and its coordinating team, but we also have what we call affiliates, affiliate congregations, affiliate organizations. Jerry mentioned the Woodstock Jewish congregation. What they did is to establish a team, a within congregation team of people who are thinking through this, who are educating themselves about this, who are looking for ways to respond, and who are actively working with the Ulster Immigrant Defense Network to support its efforts so that they don't duplicate efforts, that we're doing the same thing or on the same page, but they have their own center of energy. And we hope, and that is replicated in other congregations in Ulster County. Basically, we want our affiliates to discern for themselves how it is they want to respond and to be creative in their response. And we're happy to partner with them and have them partner with us so that we're doing this together, if in different ways and in different places.
Our website does list a partial list of our affiliated congregations and groups. So I do invite you to look at our website as well.
One thing about we're slowly building a community of affiliates because each congregation has its own polity. And so the decisions aren't made, in some cases they can be made by the clergy person in charge. But that in most congregations, decisions have to be processed through the congregation, and it's always better when the whole congregation is able to say, yes, we want to do this. And even if a congregation decides that as a congregation, it doesn't want to affiliate, it doesn't mean that individuals within that congregation can't volunteer and become part of the network. So there are many ways to support this work.
So on our website, you actually have the ability to register for contact information and to volunteer directly on our website. So I do encourage you to look at that page.
It's a very simple Google form, so you guys can do it. Any final questions? Well, do you guys have any closing remarks you would like to make, or? Yeah, wonderful. All right. Well, thank you so much for coming in today. Thank you all for being here.